Monday, August 9, 2021, jury selections began at 9 a.m. in a federal courthouse in Brooklyn, New York. Judge Ann Donnelly individually questions more than 30 potential jurors and dismisses about 13. 3 potential jurors say they cannot presume Kelly innocent. 2 potential jurors didn't know who R. Kelly was before summons. At least 2 women excused due to personal experiences with sexual abuse. Donnelly asks last-minute question for potential jurors about issues or concerns with same-sex relationships, sexual activity per defense request after prosecutors file motion saying they intend to introduce evidence of uncharged acts allegedly involving 2 teen boys.
The government is accusing Kelly of being the head of a New York enterprise that, according to this indictment, recruited women and girls to engage in illegal sexual activity with him. The illegal activity includes sex with underage girls, having sex without disclosing that he had a sexually transmitted disease, producing child pornography, extortion, and blackmail.
Donnelly asked each potential juror if they know 3 additional witnesses whose names were not included in the questionnaire. Only 1 person says yes. Tuesday, August 10th, jury selections continues. Day 2 of jury selection ends with the judge announcing there are enough qualified jurors for the attorneys to begin using their strikes. They'll begin eliminating from a pool of 50 in the morning. Final jury panel, 12 jurors, total 6 alternates, will be sworn in on August 18th before opening statements. Judge and attorneys weren't certain of preparatory totals and order. They believe it's 10 for defense and 6 for government. Each round, the government can strike 1 and the defense 2, but judge said she'll confirm using the chart in the morning. 1 potential juror was excused after admitting she'd researched racketeering and went down a rabbit hole with it. Others admitted to researching Robert Sylvester Kelly's music after getting their questionnaire, but didn't face the same excuse once they promised not to let it impact their ability to be fair and impartial. Before adjourning, attorneys asked the judge to tell the juries that parties aren't allowed to speak to them. It's not that they are being rude. This seems necessary as the parties have said no more than good morning to potential juries throughout the entire jury selection. All questions came through Judge Donnelly. Kelly wore a white paper mask and they're at the defense table during individual voir dire. Unclear why he continued to alternate between wearing one and not. He continued to show high interest in the paperwork, presumably questionnaire copies, as the judge questioned potential juries one-on-one.
Well, Vinny, the really interesting thing about how this jury selection process went, and it's likely because this is in federal court and not in state court, but first of all, only the judge asked the questions. If these attorneys wanted to ask a question of the potential jurors, they had to go to a sidebar, indicate what question they wanted to ask, and Judge Ann Donnelly asked that question to this jury. So we didn't have a lot of back and forth with the attorneys asking their questions, but in this case, there was a 105 question questionnaire that went out last month to these potential jurors. So all of those questions about whether or not they're a fan, whether or not they're familiar with R. Kelly, they all were asked those questions prior to, and that's really what the court relied on. They didn't get into those details very much.
Here are the courtroom highlights. Jury selection continued at a rather swift pace. Individual questioning lasts 5 to 10 minutes per person. News of Governor Cuomo's resignation resonates through the Brooklyn courthouse at a delayed pace because journalists and spectators alike aren't permitted to have electronics. Several potential jurors who were qualified note they have a law enforcement background or close relatives in law enforcement. One woman has a cousin with Homeland Security. Judge Donnelly tells her reps from Homeland Security will be testifying in this trial and ensures the potential juror can still be fair and impartial. I Believe I Can Fly song mentioned twice as the one thing they know about the defendant. Court clears 14 jurors for day 2 of jury selection, 4 excused and 10 retained. Bill Cosby and Jeffrey Epstein's name raised several times during R.KELLY jury selection. One potential jury said he knew a Cosby family member, and another 2 followed the Epstein scandal closely. All 3 agreed they could set aside their feelings and were qualified for the next round. And animated Robert Sylvester Kelly appears very involved in his case's paperwork at the defense table Tuesday. He's intently writing and reading paperwork while having empathetic discussions with his newly hired lawyer, Nicole Blank Becker, about the document.
The RICO statute generally is used kind of as a net to get someone that you can't necessarily peg them with 1 or 2 or 3 specific things, but you can put them in an enterprise in a group with others. Notice that this indictment talks about the charge, talks about members of the enterprise. Many times prosecutors will use RICO to pull other people into the web. Now, sometimes that's just because you want those people to be held accountable, but you also want to put pressure on the other members in the corrupt organization. And that broad net allows you to get witnesses who are more likely to turn on R. Kelly if they are under some kind of RICO indictment. I do think that prior counsel's observation that it's a little awkward to do it here because he's not the kind of gangster figure or drug lord or something of that sort where these kinds of charges have been usually hurled at those kinds of figures. But I can see it fitting. Federal court is a very bizarre place, starting with jury selection. When you start picking a trial, picking a jury for a celebrity where the lawyers don't get to participate in the questioning, it's a very different experience than what you had in state court.
Wednesday, August 18th, the jury was sworn in. A newly sworn-in jury hears opening statements in the case against R. Kelly in a Brooklyn district court. The jury consists of 12 juries and 6 alternates. On the main panel, there are 7 men, 5 women. The court has not released racial demographics on the jury at this time.
We're going to hear from bodyguards. We're going to hear from people who have driven him, people who have been managing him, his associates, his affiliates, because what's on the table is that he's this mastermind of a racketeering enterprise where what he did was he basically used his music in order to get young women to come into his realm and then make them his sex slaves and do things that were against their will. So for the prosecution, what we have is just decades of information, decades of receipts. Let's remember, in order to even get here in the first place, you needed the receipts, you needed information, you needed evidence to say this is strong enough to go to trial. R. Kelly has been to trial 2 times before, and he's gotten off in both instances. Here, they're saying, the feds are saying, we've got what we need to actually make this stick. So they have the receipts from 30 years, all the way from 1994 to Aaliyah to just a couple of years ago before he was put in jail. When it comes to R. Kelly's defense, we are going to have a lot of people's credibility being poked. These defense attorneys are going to poke holes in the credibility of these victims, of these survivors that we saw. And they're going to say, listen, this happened a long time ago. And in fact, 5 years ago, you were saying that you loved R. Kelly, that you were in a relationship with him with another woman. Now you've changed your mind. And so the goal is to make these people look like a liar. Because the threshold here is beyond a reasonable doubt, right? Beyond a reasonable doubt, we have to prove that all of this is true.